So in this segment, I wanted to talk about Boris Johnson's new nuclear power plants expected to raise energy bills by over £80 a year, and this is because of the cost of nuclear energy and also the cost of privatising it to outsider companies, really. So Boris Johnson's plan for a new nuclear power plant is expected to raise bills by over £80, analysis based on energy figures has found. The Prime Minister is expected to bet big on nuclear power in an upcoming energy strategy and build up to 8 stations, with billions in costs being met through bills. Also, the fact that it takes a long time for these stations to come online compared to renewable energy. Johnson was accused of making matters worse for bill payers because of the high cost of energy from the plants compared to alternatives. Nuclear plants produce large amounts of low carbon energy, but they are now comparatively expensive compared to renewables, whose costs have plummeted. I'm not sure why the costs have come down so much, but they're a lot cheaper, wind turbines, etc., than they were in years gone by. The government has de facto banned the construction of new onshore wind turbines, one of the cheapest forms of renewable energy, through restrictive planning rules. Now, I'm going to ask the audience this, right? I don't find wind turbines an eyesore. I really don't mind them that much when we're driving past. I think they look fine. I can imagine some people might see them as spoiling nature or whatever. Fine. I guess if you live near one and have to deal with the sound, that's a key problem. That one I'm sympathetic to if it's within earshot. But if it's not within earshot of where you live or work, then I think having onshore wind is fine. Johnson's push for nuclear comes despite reservations from Chancellor Sunak about the cost, because Sunak doesn't like spending the country's money, at least on projects that would help the country. He'd rather give it to mates. Some Conservative activists are resolutely opposed to the visual impact of onshore wind turbines. Energy company EDF, which is owned majority by the French state, estimates the cost of funding Sizewell C nuclear power plant, the only one currently under construction, will add up to £12 a year to household energy bills at its peak. And the thing is, right, becoming energy security is important, right? I'm not going to deny that. And having nuclear as part of a strategy to go off from fossil fuels is a good idea, but not like this. Not like this. Opposition politicians say that if the costs of the plans were writ large over 8 new similar projects, that would add to an £84 a year increase in bills, which people can't afford. £80 a year, you can argue, not a lot of money per month, but given the situation right now, you can't ask people to pay more. This will be in the future, but given the way the Tories run the country, you can't ask people to pay more. The increase would come about because the government's regulated asset-based funding mechanism for new plants allows constructors to share financial risk with consumers with a levy on bills. So essentially, energy companies can charge us more for the types of energy we use. And, they want to share the risk with us. So essentially, it's socialise the losses and privatise the profits, because we wouldn't see the profits from these nuclear reactors if they made any. That would go to EDF and the French state, which we'll talk about in a bit, actually. The approach is intended to reduce the risk for companies undertaking the projects because they require such high upfront capital costs. It's in the billions. These eye-watering costs show why nuclear power simply isn't the right approach at a time where household bills have risen to unprecedented levels. Increasing them more is not the solution, Wira Hobhouse, Liberal Democrat spokesperson for climate change, said. Which is true, we need to look at more other renewables, honestly. Miss Hobhouse, whose party based its cost calculations on the EDF estimates, said the Tories are simply ignoring the obvious solution. Renewables, particularly onshore and offshore wind, are far cheaper than nuclear power, and combined with an energy efficiency programme would see bills fall for millions, which should be one of the goals for the renewable technologies we move to, which is not just energy security, but also, making bills cheaper for people. The UK government estimates published by the Department for Business and Energy in 2020 say nuclear power plants generate power costs at 102 megawatts per hour. This figure is over twice the cost of onshore wind, whose equivalent cost estimate is 46 megawatt hour. That's, it's under half, which a number that has tumbled by £49 per megawatt hour since previous estimates in 2013. So you can see how much cheaper wind energy has gotten and how much the technology and the manufacturing processes have changed. By contrast, estimates for nuclear have slightly increased with nuclear's initial 2013 estimate at £95 per megawatt hour. By comparison, the figure for onshore wind is £57 per megawatt hour, while large solar installations clock in at 44 megawatt per hour, and gas with carbon capture storage £85 per megawatt hour. So you can see nuclear energy being the most expensive one out of the lot of these, and you can do it with a mix of these. So you can do comparison solar, which obviously is not going to work, all the time. But it will still keep producing energy even at night. I think it's a misconception that they only work during the sunny period. They are most efficient at the sunny period. With wind turbines, solar, I think tidal energy, the government are really looking at, amongst other things. We can create like a good solid base where we'd only need one or two extra nuclear power plants to become more energy sufficient. The government's energy strategy is being rushed up by ministers because they need something to talk about this week as the war in Ukraine raises energy costs because of the surge in gas prices. Gas prices way too high. But critics say that aside from raising bills compared to renewable alternatives, new nuclear power will also take too long to come online, talking decades. Will not fix the problems the strategy is seeking to create. I don't know how quickly wind farms can be created, but I'm guessing it can't be more than 5 years, right? The much delayed Hinckley Point C reactor, which we're actually going to talk about in a bit because that's the one I know most about, was ultimately approved in 2016 but is not expected to start generating electricity until 2027 at the earliest. And Brexit could impact that because we're struggling to import all of the raw materials we need for projects. So that could be pushed into 28, 29 really. Talking over a decade. Tom Greentex, a former Labour shadow energy minister who is now chief executive of the Nuclear Industry Association, said after the meeting, accelerating nuclear projects is absolutely essential to keep energy costs down, cut expensive gas imports and strengthen our security as we move towards net zero, which is fine, but given that he works for a Nuclear Industry Association, I don't think he's the one we should be really going to. And there's only so much you can actually speed up these projects anyways. That means urgently investing in a fleet of large and small nuclear stations alongside renewable investment delivered now. The main goal should be looking at solar energies and wind energies. That should be it, and then supplement that with nuclear energy rather than making nuclear the go-to option and the other ones as a supplement. That's what we should be looking at. There's a lot to talk about here. Energy cost per megawatt hour, as you can see, is spiked. There was a Statista. There it is. So you can see per megawatt hour is spiked recently. Let's see, coastloads, monthly average electricity prices. I think this is in British sterling per megawatt hour. So you can see it spiked to £227. That's why all the energy problems. But if you look at it in a normal year, if you look at it before the spikes had happened, £24 per megawatt hour, for example. 2018 was so you've got here right, January 2021, £90 per megawatt hour. You got £64. So I think if you average it out, taking this year out as an anomaly because of the Russian invasion, you can see it probably averages around probably the £40 to £60 mark at most. Hinckley Point C costs a lot more. Here it is here. So in 2012, known as a strike price, was set at £92.50 per megawatt hour, and that's going to go up due to inflation and other costs. It could go higher than £92 per megawatt hour. The wholesale price at the time was £40 per megawatt hour. The consumer would be paying EDF around £52.50 per megawatt hour for energy produced at Hinckley, and that's regardless of even if we used it, for example. But obviously we are, but we don't have to use it if energy demands are low, for example. It's still going to the grid. But the simple fact is, we're paying double essentially for Hinckley Point C energy. When you can see, the megawatt hour, the price for megawatt hour only recently has gone up above £90. So we'd be paying, EDF would be making a lot of money off this, essentially. And so this article here from 2017, let me get rid of this. Maybe not, it does not want to go, so ignore that thing. I'll get rid of it as soon as I can. So some critics of the project Hinckley Point C, one of the big nuclear power plants EDF are building. Some critics of the project are questioning whether Hinckley Point C's energy reactor would even work, which is crazy that we're going to, people are going to spend billions of pounds on something that might not even work. Madness. It is a new controversial design which has been dogged by construction problems and has yet to start functioning anywhere in the world. So for whatever reason, we're building a nuclear reactor, which is no guarantee it's even going to work. Some experts believe it could actually prove impossible to build, which are just... Do EDF donate to the Tory party or something? What the hell? It's 3 times over the cost and 3 times over time where it's been built in Finland and France. So we're building ones that cost way more for whatever reason. Whoever picked this is an idiot. said Paul Dorfman from the UCL Energy Institute. This is a failed and failing reactor. I mean, we're picking nuclear reactors that cost way more than they do in other countries. 3 times over the cost and 3 times over the limit what it would take to build a normal nuclear reactor. It's just madness. Others have pointed to the cost that at present total energy for Hinckley Point C is £20 billion, more than twice the London Olympics. To pay for it, the British government has entered into a complex financial agreement with EDF, the energy giant that is 83% owned by the French government, and China Nuclear Power Group, GCN, a state-run Chinese energy company. So literally what we're doing is giving money away to China and the French for this nuclear reactor. Those are the people who are going to benefit from this predominantly. According to Gerard Magnin, a former EDF director, the French company sees Hinckley as a way to make Britain fund the renaissance of nuclear energy in France. We could have built this ourselves. Britain could have built a nuclear reactor or a nuclear energy plant, but we didn't. We outsourced it to the French, who are going to make so much money from this. He added, we cannot be sure that in 2060 or 2065, British pensioners who are currently at school, who had no say in this, no votes at all, will not be paying for the advancement of nuclear industry in France. We're subsidising French energy to the tune of millions. That's what's happening here. That's what the outsourcing of has done. We're creating a system where the French will benefit from this massively. No, it's not a dig at the French, but you see my point. The trains have done this. You've got foreign train companies working here, using the money that they make from us to subsidise their own trains in their own countries. What kind of stupid system is this? In the months before the EDF board finally signed off the deal in autumn, the finance director resigned. Along with Magnin, the Hinckley Point C project remains very risky because they are putting a lot of capital up to build a reactor that might not even work. It's just crazy. The people who signed off on this deal must be insane, honestly. The irony of Hinckley Point C is that by the time it eventually starts working, it may become obsolete. Nuclear power is facing an existential crisis around the world. As the renewable energies fall and their popularity grows. The math doesn't work, says Tom Burke, former environmental advisor to BP and visiting professor at both Imperial and university colleges. And BP would be a company that would look at renewable energy because they can make a lot of money from it as the world transitions away from petrol. Nuclear simply doesn't make sense anymore, and based on the numbers we've seen, that makes sense. It's not worth it. There was a bit more on this article I wanted to talk about, so let me see if I can find it. Here it is. The financial deal struck with EDF in 2013 to fund the project, which, in Magnin's words, amount to the British taxpayer funding France's energy needs, which is great, remains one of the most controversial elements of the Hinckley deal. Given its commitment to building Hinckley Point C, the government had no choice but to make EDF an offer that was too good to resist. And you could argue at the time renewables weren't as good, but entering into these sorts of deals is dumb. It offered, especially the type of nuclear plant we've gone for, it offered to guarantee EDF a fixed price for each unit of energy produced at Hinckley for its first 35 years in operation. And it shows you how important it is for governments to make good infrastructure deals, because these sorts of deals will last way longer than some of these Tory ministers in charge that made this deal won't even live out to see the end of it, if that makes sense. In 2020, a guaranteed price known as the strike price was set at £92.50, which we've talked about how that's a ridiculous price, because that price has only just come about because of the Russian invasion. It's just crazy to me, that we've struck into this deal. This means that if the wholesale price of electricity across the country falls below £92.50, EDF will receive an extra payment from the consumer as a top-up to fill the gap. The British energy user will have to pay for this. This will be added to electricity bills from around the country. Even if you aren't receiving electricity from Hinckley Point C, everyone will have to pay for this. Socialise the losses. You will still be making a payment to EDF. The current wholesale price at the time of writing of this article, which was in 2017, was around £40 per megawatt hour. It's just crazy how much we're paying for this. Even MPs have said this is a rubbish deal. They said the subsidies have dealt the consumers a bad hand. This would have happened under the Johnson government, but it would have been the planning permission in 2016 would have been given, finalised really by the May/Johnson governments, depending on the months. It's just crazy that they talk about how the Tories are responsible with public money and they make decisions like this. And this is under this isn't under Boris Johnson, who's a lunatic in his own right. This is under David Cameron. It shows you the Tories are not good with taxpayer money, and you could talk about how important it is for what do you call it? How important it is for energy security, but these decisions are still ongoing. This is a recent article. They're going to add £80 to everyone's bills, which, okay, you could argue the energy security you give us will make us less vulnerable to global prices. But the simple fact is, these governments have cut our gas reserves as well, which makes us even more vulnerable to price changes. There are other things we could have done aside from giving money away to companies like EDF so they can make bank and fund the French Revolution in nuclear energy off the backs of the British taxpayer and energy user. It's just madness. But anyways, look, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.